I really don't think, if I were to ever have children, I really don't think I would ever treat them like children. What I mean by treating them like children is this sort of over-the-top effort that a lot of people make nowadays to drop down to the level of a child and to appease them at that level. What I mean is, like, for example, cartoons. I don't think I'll ever let my children watch cartoons. I mean, aside from the fact that so much of the cartoons nowadays is just like pedophilia grooming. If you watch, if you look at the sick, twisted cartoons on YouTube that are actually perverted ways to get pedophiles and condition children to being molested. Or if you look at how I think one or two or a few Nickelodeon cartoon artists turned out to be pedophiles. And this just goes on and on and on and on and on. I just don't think it's good to treat children like children, because I think sometimes that could reinforce their childishness. Like, I had this idea. It's very common nowadays that if you have a child, from the day it's born, you paint the walls in his room with silly, colorful colors and stupid little animated animals on the wall, and you put stuffed toys inside the crib. It's all very cartoony. And what I'm wondering is this. I feel like we're reinforcing a childish mentality by spoon-feeding children, the cartoons, the stuffed animals, the fictional cartoon universes and the toys, and the trips to Disneyland. And I know this sounds kind of crazy, and I know that it sounds a little extreme, but my intention here in questioning these norms is because if I have children one day, I want them to be as empowered as possible. And my concern is, what if we are infantilizing children? What if we are prolonging that infant mindset by shoving the cartoons in their face? I have a theory that if instead of stooping down to a child's level, you'll notice it. I've done it myself. The average person, when they see a baby and they start talking to the baby, their tone of voice will go high-pitched, and they'll talk in this silly, simplistic way to the child. And I don't think that's a good thing. It might be silly on the surface, I get it. And, people might say that it doesn't really have an effect. But I think it's a symptom of the overall trend that people are sort of treating children like children. And it reinforces their childishness. I don't think you should stoop down to a child's level when you're talking to a child. I have a theory that if you talk to a child like a complete adult, it elevates them to your level. I don't know if I ever have a baby, I don't think I'm going to be like, ooh, goo goo gaga, little cutie. I don't think I'm going to do that, because I would be concerned that that's sort of like a belittling, condescending. And again, people might say that this is extreme, but I'm only doing it because I believe that if you treat a child with a sense of dignity for who they can become, they are going to become that even quicker. But if you pile on the stupid cartoons and you pile on, do children really like cartoons? Or do we preemptively spoon feed it to them? Do children really like stuffed animals and silly ass plastic toys made in China? Or do we preemptively spoon feed it to them? So yeah, I do have this theory that it's about elevating the child to as high a level of self-actualization as possible. People say, oh, that's extreme. I mean, you got a better idea? We live in the ADHD age. We live in the age where so many kids walk around with fidget spinners, and they are being raised in the form that I'm condemning in this video. Are we raising healthy kids? Are we doing things the right way? And I actually think that this ADHD fidget spinner age is caused because we treat children like incompetent, silly little children. We don't give them the dignity of the potential they have. People say, oh, but you're saying the child's never going to have a childhood? Man, what I'm saying is that the spontaneity, the curiosity, the vibrant passion for life that we associated with being a child, that's something that doesn't go away when you're an adult. That's something that follows you to the day you die. It's like people who call Donald Trump childish. He might be childish in the sense that he likes to laugh and joke and, be spontaneous and have a fucking, personality. But there's nothing wrong with being childish in the sense of having a spontaneous, joyful passion for life. And that's not something that should be exclusive to children. But for some reason, we keep it exclusively for children. And I think it's because the modern childhood experience is one that is enabled only because children have no responsibility. They don't have responsibility at a young age. I mean, the idea of giving a child chores every week, that's out of fashion now. What we describe as childhood nowadays is a false form of joy that's created by the fact that the average parent, a lot of parents, maybe not the average, but a lot of parents do not give their children a sense of consequences to their action. Everything is buffered by parenthood, protecting the child from any sense of true individuality and responsibility. We give them this artificial packaged responsibility when they go to school and have to regurgitate a bunch of shit they have no interest in and will probably never use. That's fake responsibility. Which, as we're seeing nowadays, really turns out to be what could be a complete waste of life. Complete waste of your time for the first 18 years of your life spent in a mainstream schooling environment, which really isn't preparing a lot of people for anything. Joy and childhood, this stereotype we have of childhood joy, is something that would look much different, I think, if children were raised in a different way, the way that I'm theorizing and really think is the ideal way to do it if you want to raise empowered children. On the other hand, if you want to infantilize your children to prolong their maturity as long as possible because the only reason you had a child, or the primary reason, was because you as a parent felt you had no purpose in life and decided to vicariously get the sense of purpose by having a kid. So subconsciously, you never want your kid to grow up and leave the nest because that would leave you alone and without a purpose. So I think some parents actually deliberately prolong and treat their children like children because they want to extend childishness as long as possible so the kid doesn't leave the nest. So we have this stereotypical concept we have of childhood, and that, childhood's so magical, and aren't you just going to be robbing children of their childhood, Chris? No, because the spontaneity, the love, and the vibrant love for life that we associate with childhood, we also assume that when you grow up, you have to lose that sense of vibrant, spontaneous love and passion and curiosity for life. So what kind of deal is that? You get to be happy when you're dependent on your parents because you can, play video games all day and not have any sense of real life consequences in the world. And then when you grow up, you have to lose your sense of wonder for life and become a miserable adult. How is that a good deal? How about life from the day you're born to the day you die should be a spontaneous, wonder-filled experience. Childish like experience, if you want to call it that. But it's a childishness that's measured by a real sense of reality and consequences to one's actions in the world, which is something we rob children of when we infantilize them by making them think that life is just one big trip to Disneyland. I really do believe that if you treat children from the day they're born like they are adults, obviously you're not going to let your child, run outside, your 3-month-old infant crawl outside into the front yard. Obviously you're not going to do that. You have to check it and measure the amount of responsibility and freedom to make their own mistakes. You have to check that and measure it to the objective capacities of their current brain and intelligence level. But I do think there's a big freaking difference between what I'm proposing and what is the current mainstream, which is a way excessive push to just force feed silly, fantastical, consumeristic, passive spectatorism garbage onto children. And then you wonder why by the time they're in middle school, they're fidgety little freaks who need ADD medication or walking around with fidget spinners everywhere. Then you wonder why. Probably because subconsciously they can tell that this little fake, buffered wonderland of childhood is coming to an end in a few years, and they're not even prepared to grasp the very concept of bearing the burden of reality on themselves, because they live their whole lives vicariously through video games and cartoons and movies and Disneyland and Santa Claus, Satan Claus. So, people say, oh, it's cruel, you're robbing them of their joy. And they're, no, man. I mean, cruel to me is a poor little kid on ADHD medication at the age of 14 walking around with a fidget spinner because he can't just sit down and enjoy, staring at the sky. Or that's bad. That's problematic. So, anyways, guys, just wanted to do a quick video. What do I have to plug here? I happen to be wearing this morning my Triggered, the Second Amendment, Safe Spaces in 1791 shirts. So anyways, I'll put a link to that in the description below. While I'm here, I might as well promote one of my favorite, or a book that I really enjoyed from Audible. It's the book, I'm trying to find the most relevant one to this topic. I guess it would be The Brain That Changes Itself. The Brain That Changes Itself, The Science of Neuroplasticity. Such a fascinating read. And basically it's about the emerging science of neuroplasticity, which suggests that the brain is not some default, predeterministic, defined by your genetics, immoldable piece of meat in your brain, but rather the brain can actually physically alter itself through imposed action, imposed exercise, mental exercise. You're not a slave to predeterministic genetics and the structure of your brain. There's some type of interesting free will mechanic variable involved where you could actually will your brain to improve itself. It's been backed by incredible science, and that's what this book documents, and it's fascinating. One of my favorite books. Again, I'll put it in the link below. The audiobook is also available. It's also available in audiobook. And if you sign up for Audible, you get your first audiobook for free. So I'll put a link below. The Brain That Changes Itself, a great book, free audiobook. Thank you guys for watching.